Welcome to the 80sist, the podcast that uses your votes to determine the most totally 80s song ever to blare from the muddy speakers of a Boardman, Ohio Pizza Hut jukebox. In Cleveland, I'm Keith Marsteller, and joining me from Seattle, it's the creator of the 80sist, my longtime friend. He's my co-host. He's Joe Walk. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Keith. So, listen, I thought...
Yeah.
Since we're starting Side B today...
Awesome.
Maybe a good way to kick things off would be to talk about our favorite B-sides.
Oh, man, I love that idea. I've got a ton in mind. But let's start with you. What's your favorite?
I don't know. I never bought any singles. Most of my music in the 80s was cassettes.
Oh.
Yeah. What about our favorite words that start with B?
No.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Way to kick off Side B with a bang there, Joe. Nice job.
Bang starts with B.
Yeah. There we go.
So does Bertolt Brecht.
Oh, nice foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. That's
Foreshadowing.
Right.
Oh, wow. Well, everybody, we could not be happier to welcome you back to the 80sist.
Welcome back.
It's Side B.
It's a whole new thing because it's Side B.
It's Side B. So I'm going to stop incrementing shows to, this is not it is our 60th show, but today in our first show of Side B, Season 2, we call it also, for those podcast folks. You'll see it S2E1. You know the notation. You get it.
Nice.
Anyway.
Very professional.
Yeah, today in our first show, Joe and I are going to bring in some new listeners. We're going to explain the rules as though maybe we got some new listeners, which we have gotten several recently.
Well, all right.
And
then.
I'm guessing a lot of them haven't gone back to listen to the pilot.
Why would they?
So we're going to re-pilot the show here. That's what we're going to do.
Okay.
And
It's like Sully getting up off of the river and hopping into another plane and then taking off.
That's
from
right.
the river.
It's a re-pilot, just like Sully.
Yeah, using a Sully Sullenberger reference. That's real old.
I mean, there are older references, like anything that happened in the 80s is much older.
I guess I could say like Amelia Earhart.
Yes.
Jumping in a new plane.
Now that is an old reference.
Yeah.
So
She's dead.
In addition to bringing in the new listeners and giving them the rules of the game, we're also going to familiarize our existing listeners with some of the changes that we're going to make inside B, and they're going to be who gives a shit? But we're going to do it anyway.
Because Side B, it's a whole new world.
It is.
A whole new world.
Well done.
A new exciting point of view.
That's exactly what we're doing here on Side
right.
B. It's a whole new world. And so, Joe, I'm gonna interview you basically, kind of, for the beginning of this.
That sounds great. Can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Stop me if I sing any more Disney songs.
Okay.
Please.
I'll do that. I promise.
Yeah, just slap those lyrics right out of my face.
So, let's get...
Because I will do it.
You might do it. And
I will do it.
Don't worry. I will just turn off your microphone. I have that power.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, let's start with...
Yeah.
Joe, this was your idea. It started off with a text message, I don't know, maybe about 5 months ago at this point.
Sounds right. Wait, hang on. This is April. Yeah, 5 months. 5 months.
Something like 5 months ago. And what was the idea, Joe, when you texted me?
The idea was initially I just thought it would be kind of a fun kind of poll to post on Threads, asking people, hey, what's the between these two songs, which is 80s-er? And then I was like, well, maybe instead of wasting it on Threads where I have no followers, no one cares,
right?
I would be pissing into the void.
Right.
Maybe instead of that, we do a podcast where I have no followers and is also pissing into the void.
But at least we get to chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And eventually we started. If I'm going to follow that analogy, we started pissing on people. No, let's not.
Golden shower? Is that what you're talking about?
No. Sorry, let's scrap that whole pissing.
Throw that
thing.
whole thing away.
Shouting into the void.
We're shouting into a void, but
That's what you do into a void.
According to podcast statistics, there are a couple hundred or so people in the void now listening to us shouting.
Nice.
And so
if there's people in the void, is it a void?
I guess that makes it no longer a void. So
right.
So there you go. So we are now, and your idea was
the idea was, hey, what song would best represent the spirit of music in the 80s?
Yes. If you could distill the 80s into one item, in this case, we're doing a song. In the future, we might do a television show or a movie.
Yep. Or an object?
Or an object? Maybe Rubik's Cube or something? I don't know.
Well, you spoiled it.
Oh, shit.
Because clearly...
that would have won.
Yeah.
But, so we've done side A, and side A was 1980 through 1985 songs. And our winner of the 80s est song, spoiler if you didn't listen to season 1, side A.
If you're starting fresh here,
the 80s est song, as determined by our listeners, at least from the 64 that we proposed, was Take On Me by a-ha. So you won't be hearing that song for a while until we have the side B champion take on the side A champion for all the marbles. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a very special episode.
Right?
And I think something very important that you said, but let's go ahead and reiterate, is it was the 80s-ist song out of the 64 songs that you and I chose.
That's right.
Because we had lots of people who complained that the real 80s-ist song wasn't on the list.
Right. This and that should have been on.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what you're going to get with a diversity of opinions when you bring an audience in. Yeah. And that was part of this whole thing is, Joe, what does the 80s-ist mean to you and to me? And it might mean something completely different to someone else.
Well, you and I talked, and we came up with kind of some things that just said 80s to us.
Right.
And one of those was a lot of synthesizer.
Sure.
Yeah.
Another
thing
thing
was... that leaned heavily into the synth.
Or a big, hefty saxophone solo, for instance.
Synth and sax.
Another thing that was big, at least on side A, was that British invasion cool sound of the vocal of the little British guy being like super cool. Yep.
Barely containing his accent. Maybe a splash of jangly guitar.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then, but the thing we ran into is, and for those of you who are new listeners, Joe and I grew up together in a rural town in Ohio, United States of America.
That town, or those towns, because it was two towns.
I was in Ellsworth Township.
And I was in Berlin Center.
Yes. Which is that a township or not?
It's just a crossroads.
It's just a place.
Yeah. Just a place. BC, we called it. We called it BC.
So we grew up in this place, and we had access to basically 1.5 pop stations. Hot FM 101, and then occasionally Y103 would play.
Oh, Y103. Yeah,
something from our decade, but they were more into playing the older stuff, at least at our time.
Yeah.
And so, we got shitty pop music given to us by a DJ called AC in the Morning.
Oh. AC in the morning,
That's right.
So, Hot FM 101.
If you happen to live in, say, the Bronx as a kid, you probably heard cooler music.
Yes.
If you grew up outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and went to dance clubs, you probably heard different shit than we heard.
If you grew up in Seattle,
Yeah.
you heard different stuff.
Yeah. So the 64 one of the parts of this is you, in your infinite wisdom, thought, let's make this a 64 team bracket similar to the NCAA tournament.
That's right.
But where are those 64 songs going to come from, right? And so what we did last time is we wrote down a bunch of songs, and then we sat down and had like a negotiation session.
Yeah.
And yeah.
We really kind of looked, I mean, personally, I looked through the Hot 100. I looked through the Hot 100 of each year. And to be clear, the reason we're doing Side B right now is because we determined at the outset that the entirety of the 80s was just too much for one bracket.
Yeah.
We really couldn't whittle this down to 64 songs from 1980 through 1989. It couldn't be done.
It was too much. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And so we split it the way we split it because we thought we wouldn't have as many 80 and 81 songs. We thought it would be just a couple of those, and so we'd get those 380, those years through 85 would be like 84 and 85 we thought would be pretty heavy.
Yeah. I mean, I think that turned out to be right. Like 80, 82, 83, 84, 85, very heavily represented.
Yeah.
80 and 81,
just
it was sparse.
Yeah. And so that's why we only have the 4 years on this side and we had 6 on the other side, for those who were wondering, why didn't you just split it right down the middle? You could have.
Because we didn't. Go fuck yourself.
So we didn't. And so this season, I guess I should say, we changed the methodology, I guess you'd call it, for choosing our 64. Instead of last season, we went to a negotiating table and like kind of crammed a bunch of them into these regions, and
it was very, very much Tammany Hall, circa 1870 kind of feeling to it.
And we did a lot of bargaining,
back rooms, cigars,
and a lot of cutesy matchups. Right? Like, let's just shove these two songs together because it would be fun.
Which, to be clear, that didn't go away entirely.
Not entirely.
No.
Yeah, and so this time, Joe and I set out to independently write lists of music.
Yes, we did.
And I wrote 100 songs down. And I think you wrote 70-some songs down or something.
Something like that, yeah.
And then once we had done that, we went back to those lists and ranked them from our 80s est song for ourselves all the way down to the last one.
And that's where math lent a hand, because once we ranked them, then we had points assigned to each song depending on where the rank was.
That's right. That way. And so, that's right. If a song was, say, number 1 on my list and number 3 on Joe's list, it would have 4, it'd be 4 points. Lower score is more 80s, right? Closer to the top. But if I had a song that was 7th on my list and you didn't list it at all, we'd throw 65 on there because it didn't even make your list. And now that song would have like 72 points.
Right.
And so like a song that was 63rd on your list and not on my list is probably not going to make the bracket because it would have like 128 80s points or whatever you want to call them. So
can we just call them cool points?
Cool
and
points,
pretend we're
like the
playing
Happy
Days
game.
board game.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go.
Hey!
Hey, no. Stop. That's 70s. I'm sorry.
Oh, shit. I played the game in the 80s, though, to be fair.
Right, fair enough.
Yeah. The show is very 70s, and it's set in the 50s, so it's,
Oh, my head. All this time jumping.
So we did try a little bit harder to rank songs, and we now have a paper trail to say, hey, Joe ranked this song first on his list. This is his fault. Or Keith is the asshole that gave us...
We have an Excel spreadsheet.
We have a spreadsheet that talks about it.
Yeah.
So if you want to pin a song on me that you hate, you definitely can be like, well, the only
And
reason this song
you
is,
will.
like Crush on You last year by the Jets was one of Joe's least favorite. Party All the Time was up there as well. Both songs that I nominated.
You hateful son of a bitch.
But they're so 80s to me.
Okay.
But that's the fun of this whole game is what's 80s to you. Does it have an experiential? Joe, you can explain the experiential idea, right? Like,
well, I mean, you know, and I think a lot of people voting relied on their experiential rankings of these songs, because if a song hit you at the right time, at the right age, it stayed with you. And it doesn't necessarily matter if it has as much synth or as much saxophone solo or as much jangly guitar as others. If it hit you at exactly the right time, and you have a memory of yourself being in an exact place with exact people and hearing this song, it's experientially important to you, and you'll possibly vote for it.
Yeah.
And again, it's not the best, but it meant something to you at that time.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that is probably the hardest part of voting in the 80s. Is if you're trying to stay true to Joe's idea, it's don't vote for the best song, vote for the song that's the 80s-est to you.
And sometimes that's real hard.
Yeah. Sometimes when it's Crush on You against I Melt With You, and I Melt With You might be your favorite song of the decade, and Crush on You is annoying the shit out of you, but is undeniably produced in the most 80s way possible. Like, what do you do? But experience is experiential.
Then you rationalize and you say it's not necessarily the volume of the 80s-ness.
That's right.
It's the craft with which it's deployed.
So yeah, there you go. This is the ongoing debate. I tend to lean toward a more heavily produced, heavy-handed use of drum machines and
synth that's laid on with a trowel.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And Joe has better taste than that. And so now we have to discuss something for the new listeners, and that's why they won't be hearing the biggest acts of the decade in this show.
That's true.
And at least not in this season of this show, they won't. And Joe, this was part of your brilliant brainchild, so I'd love for you to explain the idea of legends.
Well, when we started off, we decided that we wanted to stick to acts that really kind of firmly belong in the decade. Like, they didn't do much before, they didn't have a life after. So these songs truly and eternally belong in and of the 80s. And so acts like Michael Jackson,
Prince,
who was huge before the 80s with the Jackson 5 and some solo stuff, and it was huge after the 80s with his later albums.
Black or White, that stuff in the early 90s.
All that stuff. Acts like Prince, who belongs to the ages.
Yes.
Just we determined were not, we could not say they were just 80s.
Right.
Even though, you know, Billie Jean and Purple Rain, two incredibly 80s songs. And then about maybe like a third of the way through the season, we had the idea that, hey, since we're already excluding these people, why don't we just put them in their own bracket? And so, after the conclusion of this season, we'll have a whole other bracket with legends.
Yes.
So acts that were big before, acts that just maybe had like one hit in the 80s and then blew up huge in the 90s, like your U2, your REM, etc.
Legends. And we had a show about that in on side A, where we talked about the legends we were considering, and we put out a request for comment on who you thought was missing from the list, and we heard you, and we have added a few to our list to consider, like Tom Petty, Fleetwood Mac. Today someone asked for possible consideration for Paula Abdul, and also possibly for Gloria Estefan, apart from Miami Sound Machine, because she was...
Interesting.
Yeah, so there's lots of requests out there. We now are sitting on a list of about 80, and we'll just have to cull a few out of there. But
so Kenny Rogers probably not making that final cut then.
Damn, but
probably
he
not.
had a hell of an 80s, that guy.
He knows when to fold them.
He does. Yeah. So that's how the game works. And we take a show is us sitting around talking about this song against that song. Mm-hmm. We tell stories like, well, for me, this was, I would say this happened during my first kiss or something, but I'm not sure that even happened in the 80s. No. No, that did happen in the 80s, but it's something like that. Something
but you don't want to embarrass your cousins.
That's right. We don't want them. So, anyway, we talk about them. We talk about the songs. We do a little, a light amount of research on the songs, right? We
just a little.
We throw out factoids, and then Joe and I render our votes, and then we ask, and Joe and I only get one vote each.
That's it. We're very democratic. We have no more say than you do, except. So we had a little problem last season. Yeah.
With the we never really kind of considered what would happen if songs tied.
Yeah. We figured we'd have an odd number of listeners.
I guess that was it. Yeah. And it turned out a lot of the time it was an even number of listeners.
Oh.
I think we had 4 ties.
I think so.
Yeah. And since we hadn't set it out ahead of time how to break them, the only fair thing we could think to do was to flip this 1980s $50.
Except for the very last one, when we had instead to flip this generic quarter.
That's right. We did do that. And we did that one live.
We'll do it live! Fuck it!
So Joe.
Sorry.
I know, that's always funny.
I can't not laugh. It's so fucked up how that makes me laugh every time.
It's great, though.
Yeah.
So, the question is, how are we going to break ties this season?
We're going to flip a dollar bill. No. So, because we were more mathematical this time, we have math to fall back on. So in the case of a tie, what we'll do is we will look back at our rankings, because we have, again, an Excel spreadsheet. I don't want to brag. We have
a whole Excel spreadsheet, guys.
Right, yeah.
It's legit. It's both dope and legit.
That's it.
Yeah.
Which is the first time anyone has described a spreadsheet as dope and legit. And we will look there, and basically the rankings of the song on the spreadsheet will determine which song moves forward.
That's right. If you knuckleheads can't get it together to vote one more than the other, we're going to turn this car around and take it back to our original rankings, which, due to various weird things that might not be the seed. Okay, it might not be the best seed. It's going to be whichever had the lowest ranking
on our initial
64.
Yeah.
Things had to get moved around because of putting things into regions,
Yeah.
So,
and because occasionally we did get cute with the matchups.
We got a little cute with the matchups,
despite your saying that we wouldn't.
And especially in that gall darned movies region, it's back.
Well, I mean, you can't not have 2 Lost Boys going up against each other. You can't.
Right. That's true. True facts. Spoiler alert. Yes.
Yeah.
So, a couple other things we had to discuss, and one is last season, as we got near the end, we're like, oh shit, we are going to have to sit and wait for votes, because we have the quarterfinal, and then. Well, we can't do the next show the next day. We have to give people time to vote.
Yeah, because you guys are so slow at voting.
It's like they have things to do.
It's your fault.
Families, jobs. You should be living 80s-ist at all times.
That's right.
Yeah.
Just laying there in your 80s-ist onesie.
Available now on Amazon. So check it out. We've decided, because we're in the late 80s,
Yeah.
that we are going to have a mini tournament going on the off days when you're voting on the 80s-ist side B. We're going to have a mini hair metal tournament, a 16-song hair band extravaganza to be played during the lulls of the voting on side B.
Right. So it's going to kind of stretch across the season. And the thing is, like, when we were putting this list together, we considered possibly having just one region that was entirely hair metal.
Yeah, it was there was too much pop and stuff.
Yeah.
The hair metal was going to be forced because there's no way 16 of those were better than the ones you're going to hear. So
and definitely not 16 that were as 80s as some of the stuff we would have had to have left off.
So we decided to leave hair metal out completely and give it its own game.
That's right.
And so that'll keep us from having these weeks where we have like a show, a filler show, and then 2 days off or something.
Yeah, no more clips. No more clips. We won't do that to you.
Probably. And so,
except if we do.
So yeah, Joe, we're on side B now, and
Yes.
and the music's a little different here, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I think there are a lot of songs in here that definitely sound like they could be from side A. There's songs that have that same kind of synth. There's songs that have as much British Second Invasion cred as anything from side A. But it also, I mean, because things change over the course of a decade and tastes change over the course of a decade. And so by the end of the 80s, especially you get into like, 87, 88, 89, pop music sounded a little bit different, didn't it?
It did. Some things that happened were like the rise of what would now is known as hip hop music. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of that mixed in.
A lot of it more getting more radio play in the as the 80s went on.
Yeah.
You also had more kind of what we came to call like alternative acts.
That's right. Yeah. At some point it was you heard it called different things.
College radio,
goth music. Some of it. Some folks called it. God, there's one word that they used at our college, and I can't think of it. But anyway, it's essentially alternative music.
Yeah.
And so we have a little bit of that kind of emerging and sprinkled in throughout the bracket. And so it's gonna be a little less homogenous than the first side, I think. And you might have a few matchups where it's two really different types of songs, and you're like,
which can be jarring. So we'll try and warn you so you don't go into some kind of shock.
That's right. And so that's what's going on with the music. There is one little bit of housekeeping that I'll mention. From side A, we had a couple of instances, I guess, where there were songs and we assumed they were... There's a couple of songs that are on this side that were released technically in the last month or two of 1985, but they didn't chart until 86. And so we didn't see them to put them on side A. So we're going to grandfather in a couple of songs, and we'll call them out as we get to them. There's a couple
we'll own up to it.
Yeah, there's a couple from late 1985, so you don't need to... I mean, you're welcome to write us to tell us, but we're aware. We've figured out a little bit better way to do this, but we're like, well, we don't want to let that song fall through the cracks, so...
That's true.
So we got a couple of these very late 1985 songs that we're going to allow in based on our own incompetence from side A. So I think that's a pretty decent overview of side B. Do you think, Joe?
So.
Anything?
I think we want to say, as with side A, we didn't get everybody in. And there are going to be, and especially, I mean, because now we're getting into the era of 86 through 89, when people who are our exact age were really kind of expanding their musical horizons. And so we've got people who, wouldn't listen to top 40 stuff if they had to, who were going to have things that were experientially very important to them that are not on here.
Probably so. Yeah.
And,
but some of them will make it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for us, exactly us, you and me, like during this era is when I left and went to college, and then you followed a year later.
Yep.
And getting to college got me away from top 40 radio once and for all.
Yep.
But I still know a lot of this. But I was exposed to a lot of stuff in college.
Right. I mean, even if you weren't regularly listening to top 40 radio in 86 through, or in like 88, 89,
yeah,
it was still out there. And you still heard it around campus.
For sure.
And you couldn't really escape it.
Yeah. So we've got a real interesting mix, I think.
I agree.
And we have 4 regions once again. And the 4 regions are, again, the same.
Yeah. We have movies.
That's right. We have bands.
We have singers.
And we have foreigners still without foreigner. I'm sorry.
That's right.
Thank you, Joseph. Sorry, I stepped on your line there.
No,
still
okay.
without foreigner.
Right.
Foreigner
Very
did not make this bracket. I am sorry to say.
Nope.
So we have foreigners, and even if they had, they're an American band, so they would have been in bands. So.
Oh, the irony.
And the way it shook out, with our averaging and our, of all of our things, the movies region ended up being a little more of Joe's stuff, and the foreigners region ended up being a little more of my stuff, and the other 2 regions were pretty solid 50-50 mix, I think. But
yeah.
And so that'll make it fun and interesting, because we are doing movies again. So and so Joe, anything else to add?
I think that says it all.
All right, so if you're new, hopefully now you get it. If you listen to all of side A, you're like, let's get on with it.
There you have it.
And so we will.
Yeah, and so for this episode and the next episode, there's nothing to vote on.
No.
But when it's time to vote, here's what you do. You go to our Substack, the80sist.substack.com. Or you go to and find us on Facebook by searching for the 80sist podcast.
That would be great. And as we reveal each region, our region playlists will be available on Spotify by searching for the 80s-est. And you'll see them up there, the first one to be available. Tomorrow's show is going to be the region preview for the movies region. And so the Spotify playlist for Side B movies region will magically appear on Spotify.
It'll go live.
It'll go live, and we'll do it. We'll do it live, We'll
do it live! Fuck it!
Anyway, so you can grab that there. Our podcast, you're listening to it. You might be listening on a browser or on a Facebook window, but you can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify, and you can find us on Google Podcasts and a bunch of other podcasting platforms. We're out there. Listen to us live. If you take time
to hit like, if you take time to subscribe, it helps other people find this podcast. You can send it to people.
That's true.
You can copy a link to the podcast and throw it into random conversations online.
It's true.
Like I do.
I do that all the time, too.
Yeah.
If you are a subscriber, you'll get an email, and it has a big share this publication button right in the email, and you can just go, oh, my mom and dad need to listen to this. And
maybe they do.
Yeah. We do have one listener who got her mom listening, so...
Nice.
Yeah. So, we're multi-generational podcast here. So anyway, yeah, we'd love it if you would jump on board and join us for Side B. And I think that's probably all the time we have for today's show.
That's enough time.
But please join us next time on the 80sist when we'll have our Side B movie region preview. So until then, on behalf of Joe Wack, our creator, our savior. Wait, I went too far with it.
No.
This has been Keith Marsteller saying, dang, that was a long show, Joe. My tummy is grumbling, man.
Oh, no.
I need to get some food up in me. Any ideas where I should go?
Oh, when the clock strikes 6:30, babe.
Oh, I see where this is headed. Time to head for Golden Lights.
That's right. It's a good time for the great taste.
Dinner
At McDonald's.
It's Mac tonight.
Come on, make it Mac tonight.
Great idea, Joe. I'm gonna go quarter pounder. What are you gonna get?
Dude, I'm vegetarian. Fuck McDonald's. But that song is bitch, and it's classic Bertolt Brecht. Oh yeah.
Whatever that means.
And the clock strikes 6:30, babe. Time to head for Golden Lights. It's a good time for a great taste dinner at McDonald's.